You don't move into a haunted house. You move into a house that waits. This one doesn't slam doors. It doesn't scream. It doesn't chase you down hallways. It listens. Every breath you take at night, every memory you replay in the dark, every secret you think you've buried, this house learns it. And the moment you finally fall asleep is the moment it wakes up. This is not a story about ghosts. This is a story about what happens when a house knows you better than you know yourself.
Chapter 1. Chapter 1. You don't choose the house. It chooses you. The house stood at the end of Grindle Street like it had been waiting too long. Not abandoned, waiting. Its Victorian bones rose out of the fog with a patience that felt deliberate. Steep gables, narrow windows, paint the color of old bone. The porch light was already on when Daniel Hale arrived, though the realtor had sworn the power was unreliable. Warm light spilled across the steps, cutting a clean path through the evening mist. It felt like mercy. Daniel paused at the curb, hands still on the steering wheel, the engine ticking softly as it cooled. Silence pressed in from all sides, thick and padded, the kind that swallowed sound before it could echo. No traffic, no neighbors, even the cicadas had gone quiet. After months of hospitals, whispered condolences, and nights that stretched endlessly beside an empty bed, the quiet felt like a gift. It felt like mercy. He stepped out of the car. The air smelled faintly of damp wood and something older, dust that had never truly settled. As he crossed the yard, the porch boards creaked beneath his weight, though he was certain he hadn't touched them yet. The sound came early, anticipatory, like the house clearing its throat. The front door was unlocked. Daniel hesitated, keys cold in his palm. He tried the handle anyway. It turned smoothly, without resistance, as though it had been turned moments before. Inside, warmth greeted him. Not the stale heat of a sealed building, but something lived in. The lights in the foyer glowed softly, casting long shadows across wallpaper patterned with fading vines. The air hummed faintly, alive with electricity. A grandfather clock stood against the far wall, its pendulum already swinging. Tick, tock. Daniel frowned. He hadn't wound it. The realtor's words echoed back to him. The house has good bones, but it's been empty for years. Empty didn't feel like the right word. He stepped inside. The door closed behind him with a gentle click. Not slammed, not hurried, final. The sound seemed to settle into the walls, as though absorbed. The house smelled clean, too clean. No rot, no mildew, just polish, old paper, and the faintest trace of lavender, his wife's soap. Daniel's breath caught. He told himself this was coincidence. Old houses smelled like old memories, that was all. He moved slowly, room to room. The living room fireplace was cold but freshly swept. The couch faced the windows, positioned as if someone had been sitting there recently, watching the street. The kitchen counters were bare, wiped down, waiting. Upstairs, the hallway lights were already on. Daniel stopped at the foot of the stairs, heart ticking faster than the clock downstairs. He listened. The house made no sound now, no creaks, no settling groans. It was holding itself still, observing. He climbed. Each step felt measured, deliberate, as though the stairs had adjusted themselves to his stride. At the top, doors stood ajar, just enough to invite curiosity. A guest room, a study, and at the end of the hall, the bedroom. His bedroom. The one he hadn't unpacked yet, the one he hadn't chosen. The bed was made. Fresh sheets, pale blue, tucked tight. A lamp glowed softly on the nightstand. The window was cracked open an inch, letting in cool air and the distant smell of rain.
Daniel froze in the doorway. It felt like mercy. The rational explanations came easily. The realtor, a cleaning service, a misunderstanding. He repeated them silently like a prayer until his pulse slowed. He told himself this was what starting over looked like. He unpacked slowly, methodically, grounding himself in the mundane. Clothes into drawers, books onto shelves, his wife's photograph, hesitating, then placing it face down in the top drawer instead. Night came without announcement. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock downstairs count time he couldn't feel. Sleep hovered just out of reach, fragile but close. The house remained perfectly still. No whispers, no footsteps, no movement at all. As if it were waiting for something. As if it were learning the shape of his breathing. Hours passed, though outside, the night stayed the same. Just before sleep finally claimed him, Daniel thought he felt a subtle shift beneath the mattress. Not movement, adjustment, like the house settling its weight more comfortably around him. The clock downstairs struck once, then stopped. In the quiet that followed, the house seemed to lean in, attentive. Because the house didn't act yet. First, it needed to understand who he was. And Daniel, exhausted and grateful, finally closed his eyes, never noticing the bedroom door, slowly, silently, drift the rest of the way open.
Chapter 2. Chapter 2. The first night is always the quietest. Daniel slept. Not the shallow, fractured rest he had grown used to, filled with half-dreams and sudden awakenings, but a deep, uninterrupted sleep that swallowed him whole, the kind that erased time, the kind that forgave him for still being alive. The house allowed it. His breathing slowed, his muscles loosened, his thoughts, usually sharp with grief, dissolved into nothing at all. No dreams came, no memories clawed their way up from the dark, just blackness, soft, complete, and heavy as velvet. The house stayed still while he was awake. That rule held even now, lingering like a promise just barely kept. Somewhere in the walls, the temperature adjusted itself, degrees shifting until the room matched the exact warmth of his skin. The air moved in slow, careful currents, timed to the rise and fall of his chest. The window remained open precisely an inch, enough to let in oxygen, not enough to chill. Downstairs, the grandfather clock resumed its pendulum swing. Tick, tock. In the kitchen, the clock on the microwave flickered. Its numbers slid backward by 1 minute, then corrected themselves. In the hallway upstairs, a small brass clock mounted above the linen closet jumped ahead 5 minutes, then froze. Time in the house did not agree with itself. The floorboards in the bedroom waited. They had learned the pattern of Daniel's breathing now, the length of each inhale, the faint hitch at the end of each exhale. Only when the rhythm stabilized did the wood contract, just a fraction of an inch, not enough to creak, not enough to wake him. The house stayed still while he was awake. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Daniel did not stir when the hallway light dimmed slightly, responding to the deepening of his sleep. He did not notice when the bedroom door eased shut just enough to block the draft, leaving it ajar by a polite, deliberate margin. He dreamed nothing. That was the strangest part. When he finally woke, it was morning, or something like it. Pale gray light filtered through the curtains, the colorless promise of dawn. His body felt heavy, but rested. His mind was quiet. For a brief, dangerous moment, Daniel felt grateful. It felt like mercy. He sat up and listened. No sounds greeted him. No house noises, no birds, no distant traffic. The silence felt thicker now, denser, as if the walls had absorbed the night and refused to let it go. He swung his legs out of bed. The floorboard beneath his foot creaked. Daniel froze. It hadn't creaked the night before, he was sure of it. He had been awake then, listening, cataloging every sound like a man waiting for a verdict. The house stayed still while he was awake. Downstairs, the grandfather clock read 6:12 a.m. In the kitchen, the clock on the microwave read 6:07. Daniel frowned, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Old houses, old wiring. He told himself the explanations before the unease could root. He made coffee. The machine sputtered, then settled into a steady rhythm. Steam filled the kitchen, carrying with it that same faint lavender scent, stronger now. He didn't comment on it. He drank his coffee standing up, watching the light shift across the floor. When he checked the clock again, it read 6:43. His watch read 6:19. Daniel swallowed. The rest of the morning passed without incident. The house behaved itself. No doors moved, no sounds followed him. The quiet returned to its earlier merciful state. By afternoon, the unease had dulled. By evening, he had almost convinced himself the night before had been exactly what he needed. That was when the fatigue returned. It came early, heavy and insistent, dragging at his eyelids. Daniel tried to read, then gave up. The words slipped away too easily. His body wanted the bed, wanted the dark. The house stayed still while he was awake. He lay down just after 10, telling himself he would rest his eyes. The mattress adjusted beneath him, supply, helpfully. The air warmed again. Sleep took him faster this time. And this time, the house began to move sooner. The first sound was so faint it barely existed, a soft compression in the walls, like a long breath held too long finally released. The hallway floorboards shifted, not beneath weight, but anticipation. Tick, tock. The grandfather clock skipped a beat. Daniel rolled onto his side. His breathing slowed. The house leaned closer. Somewhere above the ceiling, something slid an inch to the left. In the walls, pipes contracted, then expanded, syncing themselves to a new internal rhythm. The clocks dissynced again, one racing forward, another dragging its feet. The house was experimenting, learning what happened when it changed small things. Daniel stirred, brow furrowing, but did not wake. The bed frame creaked softly this time, testing the boundary. The sound brushed the edge of his consciousness, then faded. Minor relief. The house withdrew just a little. The rules still held, for now, because the first night is always the quietest, and the house had learned something important. Daniel slept through the sound of the bedroom door opening a fraction wider than before. He slept through the soft, patient shift of the floorboards beneath the doorway. He slept through the moment the house realized it no longer needed to stay completely still.
Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Insomnia is how it studies you. Daniel stopped sleeping on the third night. Not all at once, not dramatically. Sleep simply loosened its grip. He lay in bed with his eyes closed, body heavy, mind alert. The house remained quiet, perfectly obedient as long as he stayed still. The moment he shifted, just a roll of the shoulder, a bend of the knee, the walls responded with a soft, delayed sound. Not a creak, not a knock, a reply. The house stays still while you're awake. He whispered the phrase to himself like a rule, like something learned the hard way. It helped at first. As long as he didn't move, the house behaved. But the body always moves eventually. His thoughts grew louder in the dark,
unwanted, familiar. They circled the same places, hospital rooms washed in fluorescent light, the smell of antiseptic, the sound of a monitor flatlining into silence. He tried breathing exercises, tried counting. Tick, tock. The grandfather clock downstairs kept perfect time now, too perfect. Each second landed exactly when he expected it to, as if the house were reassuring him. When Daniel finally sat up, the sound came a moment later, the faint shift of wood somewhere in the walls, delayed, measured. He swung his legs over the side of the bed. A pipe knocked twice, sharp, hollow. Daniel froze. The echo something he hadn't heard in months, the impatient rap of his knuckles on a hospital door, waiting for a doctor who never came fast enough. His chest tightened before he could stop it. "It's just pipes," he whispered, voice dry. The house listened. He stood and paced the room. Each step was answered, not immediately, but eventually. The house was lagging behind him now, like it was learning the timing. The hallway ended abruptly at the cracked door, and beyond it, darkness waited. Daniel hesitated, then stepped out. The light behind him dimmed a fraction, responding to his retreat. Downstairs, the kitchen clock ticked faster than the one in the hall. Time disagreed again. Daniel poured a glass of water. His hands shook. The glass clinked against the counter. A pipe knocked once, longer this time. The rhythm stirred another memory, late-night arguments, his wife's voice tight with exhaustion, the pause before words that hurt more than shouting. The knock came again, matching the cadence of that silence. Daniel set the glass down hard. "Stop," he said, feeling foolish the moment the word left his mouth. The house did not stop. It adjusted. As he leaned against the counter, heart racing, the knocking softened, slowing until it matched his breathing. When his breath hitched, the sound stuttered with it. The house wasn't copying his movements. It was copying his feelings. Minor relief came when the sound faded entirely. Daniel laughed weakly, rubbing his face. Lack of sleep, grief, old houses making old noises. He returned upstairs before the quiet could betray him again. That night, he did not lie down. He sat on the edge of the bed, lights on, daring the house to respond. It didn't. The walls stayed inert. The floorboards remained silent. The house stays still while you're awake. Satisfied, Daniel allowed himself to relax. That was when exhaustion betrayed him. His head dipped, his eyes closed, just for a second. The sound came immediately. Not loud, intimate. A soft, almost affectionate creak beneath the bed frame, followed by a distant knock in the walls. 3 beats. He knew that rhythm. It was the pattern of his wife's fingers tapping when she was anxious, the same cadence she'd used in the waiting room the night everything ended. Daniel's eyes snapped open. The house froze. He laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound that echoed too clearly. "That's not fair," he muttered. "That's cheating." Silence answered him. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Daniel tried lying down again, keeping his eyes open this time. The mattress remained perfectly still. He counted his breaths. He counted the seconds between ticks of the clock. Tick, tock. When he finally blinked just once, the house tested him. The floorboard near the door shifted, just a whisper of movement. Daniel's heart leapt, then settled when nothing else followed. Minor relief. He began to understand then. The house wasn't trying to scare him awake.
It was waiting for him to fall apart. Because insomnia stripped him down, because exhaustion loosened memories and let them drift closer to the surface, because in the quiet hours his thoughts spoke out loud, even when his mouth didn't. On the fourth night, he caught himself whispering her name. The pipes answered, soft, gentle, in time with the syllables. Daniel pressed his hands over his ears, rocking slightly on the bed. His heart slowed, but a whisper in the walls made it race again. A sound not quite a voice, not quite air moving through old wood. The house was practicing, learning which memories hurt the most, learning which rhythms made him break. As dawn crept in through the curtains, Daniel realized he hadn't slept at all. His body ached, his thoughts felt thin and exposed. The house felt closer, because insomnia was no longer a symptom. It was the invitation, and the house had accepted.
Chapter 4.
Chapter 4. It knows what you lost. The smell came first. Daniel noticed it halfway down the stairs, drifting up from the lower floor like a memory that had taken a wrong turn. Warm, familiar, butter and sugar, faintly scorched at the edges. Vanilla. He stopped with one hand on the banister, fingers tightening around the smooth, worn wood. The scent didn't belong in the house. He hadn't cooked. He barely ate anymore. The kitchen had been empty the night before, sterile, neutral, obedient. Now it smelled like Sunday mornings, like the kitchen they used to share. Daniel closed his eyes, just for a moment, and the house leaned into it. The smell deepened, thickened, layering itself with something else, coffee, dark and bitter, exactly the way she liked it. His chest tightened before he could stop it. Nothing here is accidental. He opened his eyes and continued down the stairs. The kitchen looked the same, clean counters, bare table, no evidence of food or warmth, and yet the air was saturated with the past. The smell clung to his clothes, his hair, the inside of his throat. "Stop it," he said quietly, though he didn't know who he was speaking to. The house listened. As the day passed, the house grew bolder. A door on the second floor led somewhere new. Daniel was certain of it. He had counted the rooms before, had done it twice, pacing the hallway in the early hours of another sleepless night. But now, between the study and the guest room, there was a narrow door he did not recognize. He stood before it, heart thudding, hand hovering inches from the knob. The hallway ended abruptly at the cracked door, and beyond it, a bathroom. Small, narrow, tile the color of old pearls, a clawfoot tub tucked against the far wall. The room was lit softly, warmly, as if expecting him. It was not his bathroom. It was hers. Not exactly, not perfectly, but close enough to hurt. The mirror bore the same thin crack along its edge. The towel rack sat at the same awkward angle. Even the faint rust stain beneath the faucet curved the same way. Daniel staggered back a step. Nothing here is accidental. He shut the door hard, breath coming fast, heart racing. The house did not respond immediately. It let him have the silence, let him feel foolish for panicking. Minor relief. That night, the voices started. Not words, never words, just sounds that hovered at the edge of meaning, murmurs in the walls, a breath that wasn't his, the suggestion of speech without the shape of it. He heard them only when he wasn't listening for them, when he brushed his teeth, when he stared out the window, when he thought, briefly, dangerously, that he might be getting used to the house.
The whispers aligned themselves with memory. When guilt surfaced, the sound deepened. When regret crept in, it sharpened. The house wasn't repeating events, it was reflecting emotions. Daniel found the living room rearranged when he returned from a restless walk around the block. The couch angled slightly differently, the chair closer to the fireplace. Subtle changes, improvements. It looked like a room designed for conversation, designed for two. He laughed then, a thin, cracked sound that echoed too loudly. "You're trying too hard," he told the empty space. "She's gone." The house waited. Later, as he lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he heard it clearly for the first time. His name, not spoken outright, not formed with a mouth, just the rhythm of it, tapped softly through the walls, syllable by syllable, the way she used to say it when she was tired. Daniel's breath hitched. The sound stopped. The house was watching him now, not his body, but his reactions, measuring the effect, cataloging the response. Nothing here is accidental. On the 5th day, he found the photograph. It sat on the nightstand when he returned from the shower, propped neatly against the lamp. The same photograph he had placed face down in the drawer, the same one he hadn't touched since moving in. Daniel stared at it for a long time. The image showed them laughing, caught mid-moment, sunlight flaring across the lens. He remembered that day, remembered thinking, "This is enough. This is everything." His hands trembled as he picked it up. The house stayed still, as long as he didn't cry. He placed the photo back down, face up this time, and lay beside it. Exhaustion pulled at him, heavy and insistent. For a few minutes, the house allowed the quiet to return. Then the smell came back, stronger now. The bed creaked softly, not beneath movement, but anticipation. Daniel squeezed his eyes shut, heart pounding, mind racing. He understood it then. The house wasn't haunting him, it was curating him, selecting memories, adjusting details, rebuilding the spaces he missed most, not to comfort him, but to keep him engaged, to keep him present, to keep him here. Because the house didn't need fear yet. It needed attachment. As Daniel drifted into another shallow, restless half-sleep, the whisper returned, closer this time, nearer the bed, threading itself through the walls like breath through teeth. The house knew what he had lost, and it was learning exactly how to give it back, just enough to make sure he never wanted to leave.
Chapter 5.
Chapter 5. The Rooms Rearrange After Midnight. The first time Daniel noticed the hallway was longer, he blamed exhaustion. He stood outside the bedroom just after midnight, barefoot on the cool wood floor, staring down the corridor that led to the stairs. The lights were on, he was careful about that now, but the distance felt wrong. The staircase sat farther away than it should have, its shadow stretched thin, like a reflection pulled too far from its source. Daniel took a step forward. The hallway answered by doing nothing at all. He exhaled slowly, forcing his shoulders to loosen. Insomnia warped perception. Grief did worse. He had read that somewhere. He told himself the house was unchanged, that it was his mind playing tricks to fill the empty hours. Still, when he reached the stairs, his legs ached as if he'd walked twice the distance. He didn't go down. That night, sleep refused him entirely. He lay on the bed, eyes open, listening to the house breathe around him. The walls made no sound, but he felt a pressure in the air, subtle and constant, like a held breath waiting for permission to release. The house stayed still while he was awake. At 12:17 a.m., he decided to leave. The thought came sudden and sharp, cutting through the fog of fatigue. He would pack a bag, just essentials, drive until the sun came up, sleep somewhere anonymous, somewhere that didn't know his name. The moment the decision settled in his chest, the house reacted. Not with noise, with space. Daniel stepped into the hallway and stopped short. The hallway stretched before him, impossibly long now, walls narrowing as they receded, the far end dissolving into shadow. Doors lined the sides, more than before, too many. His heart began to race. "Get a grip," he muttered, though the words sounded thin. He took another step. The hallway remained still. Then his fear caught up. The lights flickered, not out, just dimmer, and the distance between him and the stairs increased by a breath, by an inch, by a subtle, undeniable margin. Daniel ran. The sound of his feet slapped against the floor, echoing wrong, arriving late. The hallway responded eagerly now, lengthening with each spike of panic, stretching itself like a living thing waking from rest. The house responds fastest when you try to leave. He reached for a door on the left, any door, and yanked it open. A closet. Too deep. Shelves extended farther back than the width of the house should allow, stacked with nothing but darkness. Cold air poured out, carrying the faint smell of dust and something metallic. Daniel slammed it shut, breath ragged. Minor relief came when the hallway stopped growing. He forced himself to slow down, to breathe. As his heart rate steadied, the walls seemed to relax, pulling back just a fraction. The stairs crept closer. The house wasn't blocking him. It was training him. He reached the top of the stairs and descended quickly, refusing to think about how many steps there were. At the bottom, the front door waited, solid, familiar, reassuring. Daniel crossed the living room in a rush and grabbed the handle. It didn't budge. He tried again, harder. The door remained firmly, politely shut. Behind him, the living room shifted. The couch slid an inch to the left, cutting off his direct path back to the stairs. The lamp tilted, casting new shadows that pooled at his feet. The fireplace darkened, its brickwork deepening in color, like a mouth closing. Daniel's pulse spiked. The house responded instantly. The ceiling seemed higher now, the room wider, the front door farther away, retreating just beyond comfortable reach. "Okay," said Daniel, forcing calm into his voice. "Okay, I get it." The word "it" echoed faintly, as if repeated by something that didn't quite understand language yet. He stepped back from the door. The room eased. The couch slid back into place. The shadows softened. The front door crept closer, returning to its original, unreachable position. The message was clear. Fear made the house flexible. Calm made it rigid. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Daniel did not try the door again. He sat instead, back against the wall, eyes tracking every corner of the room. The house made small adjustments around him, testing angles, changing distances, but nothing sudden. When exhaustion finally dragged him towards the stairs again, he found them altered. Now they curved, not dramatically, just enough to disorient. Each step felt slightly off, the rise uneven, the depth inconsistent. By the time he reached the top, his legs shook with effort. The hallway had returned to normal length. The bedroom door stood open, inviting. Daniel hesitated on the threshold, dread coiling tight in his stomach. The bed waited exactly where he'd left it, sheets smooth, lamp glowing softly. The house stayed still while he was awake. He lay down fully dressed, staring at the ceiling, too tired to think, too afraid to sleep. The room did not move. The walls held their shape. As his breathing slowed, despite his best efforts, the house made one last subtle change. The bedroom door drifted shut. Not all the way, just enough to remind him The rooms only rearranged when he was afraid.
Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. You can't lock a door that wants you inside. By the 6th night, Daniel had stopped trusting doors. He tested them compulsively now, turning knobs twice, sometimes 3 times, listening for the click, the finality of it. He leaned his weight against them, pressed his palm flat to the wood, waited to feel movement. Nothing moved while he watched. The house didn't challenge certainty. It waited for weakness. Daniel locked the bedroom door before sunset. He did it early, deliberately, while his hands were steady and his thoughts still his own. The bolt slid home with a solid, reassuring sound. Click. He exhaled and allowed himself a thin smile. "There," he said softly, as if speaking to a child. "Rules." The house did not answer. Evening passed quietly, too quietly. Daniel sat on the bed, back against the headboard, lamp on, book open but unread. His words swam uselessly on the page. His thoughts kept drifting towards conversations unfinished, apologies delayed too long. Guilt had weight. He felt it in his chest, pressing down, heavy as sleep. The house doesn't chase, it invites. He caught himself thinking her name again. The syllables formed without sound, habit stronger than intention. Immediately, the air in the room shifted. Warmer, softer. The lamp dimmed slightly, not flickering, adjusting. Daniel snapped the book shut. "Don't," he whispered. The house stayed still. Midnight came without ceremony. The clocks disagreed again, but Daniel no longer checked. Time had stopped meaning anything here. Only patterns mattered now, reaction and response. He stood and crossed the room, testing the lock again. It held. Minor relief. Daniel leaned his forehead against the door, breathing slowly, grounding himself in the solidness of it. The wood was cool, real. He could leave in the morning. Daylight would fix this. Daylight always fixed things. Behind him, the bed creaked softly. Not with movement, with memory. The sound was unmistakable. The slight groan the mattress used to make when she sat down beside him, careful not to wake him, careful always. His throat tightened. Daniel turned slowly. The bed was empty, perfectly made. The creak came again, closer this time. His heart began to race, and the house responded immediately. The walls seemed to lean inward, not closing in, but narrowing choices, guiding attention. Daniel backed towards the door. The lock clicked. He spun around, heart pounding. The bolt had slid halfway open. "No," he said louder now. "No, you don't." He twisted the knob. It resisted for just a moment, long enough to hope, then turned easily in his hand. The door opened inward, toward him. The house doesn't chase, it invites. Beyond the threshold was not the hallway. It was a room he hadn't seen before. Soft light filled it, familiar light, the color of late afternoons spent pretending time wasn't moving forward. A chair sat near the window, a small table, a throw blanket folded just the way she used to fold it. Daniel's breath hitched. "This isn't real," he said, though his feet betrayed him, stepping forward without permission. The door closed behind him. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. The room smelled like her shampoo, like warmth, like the life he hadn't saved. Nothing here is accidental. The house did not show him her face. It didn't need to. The guilt was enough. The way he hadn't answered his phone that night. The way he thought, "I'll call her back in 5 minutes." 5 minutes that never came. The chair creaked softly, inviting him to sit. Daniel shook his head, tears burning his eyes. "You're not her," he whispered.
You don't get to use her." The house listened. Then it gave him what was worse. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating, filled with all the words he hadn't said. Apologies stacked on top of regrets, layered so densely they became impossible to separate. Daniel sank into the chair. The moment he did, the room softened around him. The light warmed. The tension eased. His heart slowed despite himself. Minor relief. The house rewarded surrender. He stayed there for a long time, minutes, hours, impossible to tell, wrapped in a false peace built from his own longing. The room didn't change. It didn't need to. When Daniel finally stood, resolve hardening in his chest, the door back to the bedroom stood open. He crossed the threshold without looking back. The bedroom was unchanged. The lock hung useless, bolt fully withdrawn. Daniel closed the door and did not lock it again. There was no point. As he lay back on the bed, exhaustion claiming him, the house made no sound, no movement, no tricks. It had learned something important. Locks weren't barriers. Guilt was. And the house knew exactly which doors Daniel would always open himself.
Chapter 7.
Chapter 7. The house practices your voice. The house began speaking on the 7th night. Not loudly, not clearly. It started with fragments. Daniel stood at the sink, staring at his reflection in the darkened window above it, when he heard a sound behind him, soft, almost thoughtful. A breath that wasn't his, a pause that felt intentional. "I should have..." The words didn't finish. They didn't need to. Daniel's hands tightened around the edge of the counter. His reflection stared back at him, hollow-eyed, unshaven, older than he remembered. He didn't turn around. He didn't want to give the house the satisfaction of seeing his reaction. The house doesn't chase, it invites. He went upstairs slowly, each step deliberate. The hallway lights were already on, glowing dimmer than usual, like they were conserving energy. The walls felt closer now, not shifting, listening. When Daniel reached the bedroom, he closed the door behind him. He did not lock it. The whisper came again as he sat on the bed. "I didn't mean." This time it sounded closer, not from the walls, from the room itself. Daniel swallowed. His heart hammered hard enough that he was sure the house could hear it. He forced himself to speak, to break the silence before it could shape itself into something worse. "This isn't my voice," he said. The house waited. Then, softly, almost kindly, it answered. "Not like that." Daniel's breath caught. The tone was wrong, too precise. The cadence matched the way his thoughts slowed when he was tired. The slight hesitation before the second word, his hesitation. The house wasn't copying what he said. It was copying how he thought. He stood abruptly, pacing the room, refusing to let the fear settle. The floorboards responded late, echoing his steps after he'd already moved on. The delay made his skin crawl. "Stop," he said, again, louder now. The house practiced silence. Minutes passed. Nothing happened. Daniel's pulse slowed. He almost laughed, dark humor bubbling up despite himself. Maybe this was the breaking point people talked about. Maybe he was finally losing it. Then he heard it from the hallway. "If I had just..." The phrase carried his voice exactly. Same pitch, same breath pattern, same quiet self-recrimination he'd never spoken aloud because saying it made it real. Daniel backed toward the wall, heart racing. The house responded instantly. The whisper repeated again, closer now, adjusting its timing. The pause between words shortened, smoothing out imperfections. It was refining the sound, practicing. Hours passed, though outside the night stayed the same. Daniel didn't sleep. He sat on the bed, arms wrapped around himself, listening as the house experimented. The phrases changed slightly each time, not random but iterative. I should have been there. I should have stayed. I should have known. Each repetition grew more confident, more him. The house mimicked the way his voice dropped when guilt crept in, the way it softened around certain memories. It learned which words made his chest tighten, which ones made his hands shake. The fear shifted. It wasn't the house anymore. It was recognition. Because the house knew things he had never said, thoughts he had never formed into language, regrets that existed only as pressure behind his eyes, as weight in his chest. Nothing here is accidental. Daniel pressed his palms over his ears, rocking slightly. His heart slowed, but a whisper in the walls made it race again, this one barely audible, threaded through the plaster like breath through fabric. Daniel. His name spoken exactly the way she used to say it when she was worried. He let out a broken sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. "You don't get to say that," he whispered. "You don't get to sound like me, like her." The house did not argue. It adjusted. The whisper softened, the cadence gentled, the tone shifted until it carried concern instead of guilt. Familiar warmth wrapped around the sound, easing his breathing despite himself. Minor relief. Daniel hated it, because the relief felt earned, because the house was no longer frightening him, it was understanding him, and understanding was worse. He lay back on the bed eventually, exhaustion winning the war his will could not. His eyes stayed open, fixed on the ceiling, as the whispers faded into silence. For a long time, the house said nothing at all. Just when Daniel began to believe it had stopped, the final whisper came, perfectly timed, perfectly voiced, indistinguishable from his own thoughts. "You can stay." The house didn't need to scare him anymore. It had learned how to sound like home. And that was when Daniel realized the truth that hollowed him out completely. He wasn't afraid of what the house might do. He was afraid of how easily it understood him.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 8. Sleep is the price of staying alive. Daniel stopped measuring time by clocks. They no longer agreed with one another, and he no longer trusted anything that claimed to move forward. Instead, he measured time by symptoms, by the weight behind his eyes, by the tremor in his hands, by the moments when reality thinned just enough for something else to press through. Sleep had become dangerous, but not sleeping was worse. He sat at the kitchen table, third cup of cold coffee untouched, staring at a crack in the wall that hadn't been there yesterday. It ran vertically, thin as a hairline fracture, stretching from ceiling to floor. When he focused on it too long, it seemed to pulse, subtle, rhythmic, like a vein. Daniel blinked hard. The crack remained. His thoughts felt sluggish now, as if they had to wade through syrup to reach the surface. He knew this feeling. He had read about it once, late at night, back when sleep was still optional. Micro-sleeps, hallucinations, the brain eating itself alive to survive. The house stayed still while he was awake, but awake no longer meant what it used to. He stood and nearly fell, the room tilting sideways before correcting itself. The floorboard shifted under his feet, not in response to fear this time, but something quieter, something closer to concern. The house adjusted the space to catch him. "Don't help," he muttered, dragging himself upright. His voice sounded wrong in his own ears, flattened, distant,
like it had traveled too far to reach him. He made it upstairs and collapsed onto the bed without meaning to. The mattress welcomed him immediately, contouring to his body, warm and familiar. Too familiar. Panic flared. Daniel jerked himself upright, heart racing. The room reacted instantly. The walls flexed, the ceiling lifted, the door creaked open a fraction, offering air, space, relief. The house doesn't chase, it invites. Not like that, he whispered hoarsely. Not like this. He understood now, or thought he did. Sleep was not just rest here, it was consumption. The nights he had slept deepest were the nights the house had changed the most, learned the fastest, grown bolder. And the nights he stayed awake, truly awake, the house hesitated, slowed, pulled back into itself. But the cost was mounting. His hands shook constantly now. Words slipped away mid-thought. He caught himself staring into rooms, forgetting why he'd entered them. Once, he stood in the hallway for what felt like hours, unable to remember which door led to the stairs. Hours passed, though outside, the night stayed the same. Daniel began seeing things that did not respond to the house. Shadows that moved too quickly, flickers at the edges of his vision that vanished when he focused. He heard voices sometimes, normal voices, conversational, mundane, coming from rooms he knew were empty. Those frightened him more than the house ever had, because the house reacted to fear. These did not. On the 9th night without real sleep, Daniel collapsed again, this time on the living room floor. His body simply shut down, muscles giving out without warning. He lay there, cheek pressed to the carpet, breathing shallow and fast. The house waited. Seconds stretched. Minutes. Daniel fought to keep his eyes open, forcing himself to count breaths, heartbeats, anything to stay conscious. Tick. Tock. The grandfather clock skipped a beat. Daniel's eyes fluttered. The house moved immediately. The walls pressed in, not aggressively, but efficiently. The lights dimmed to a soft dusk. The air warmed. The floor beneath him softened, becoming almost mattress-like. "No," he rasped, trying to push himself up. His arms trembled uselessly. The house fed of sleep, but it could not force it. Yet. He laughed weakly, a cracked, hysterical sound. "You need me asleep, don't you?" he whispered. "That's the deal." The house responded by easing the pressure, giving him space to rise. As soon as his eyes fully opened, the room snapped back into place. Hard floor, sharp corners, unforgiving angles. Survival had become transactional. Sleep fed the house, wakefulness starved it. But starvation was killing him faster. By morning, if it was morning, Daniel understood the final rule. There was no escape. There was only negotiation. He slept in fragments now, seconds at a time, micro-surrenders. He learned to wake himself with pain, biting his tongue, digging nails into his palms before the house could settle too deeply around him. The house learned too. It began responding faster, adjusting quicker, anticipating his tricks. The bed softened sooner, the lights dimmed faster, the whispers returned, gentle, familiar. "Just rest. You need this. You've earned it." The voice was his own again. Perfect. Daniel sat on the edge of the bed, swaying slightly, exhaustion hollowing him out. His heart slowed, then stuttered. Black spots danced across his vision. He knew then what the house truly wanted. Not his fear, not his grief, his surrender. As he finally lay back, eyes burning, mind slipping, the house grew very, very still. Patient. Because whether he slept or not, the price
was going to be paid.
Chapter 8.
Chapter 9. Every house has a final room. Daniel found the door by accident. Or maybe the house decided he was ready. It was late enough that the concept had lost meaning, and he was drifting through the ground floor in a state just shy of collapse. His body moved on habit alone, feet carrying him through rooms he knew too well and not well enough. The house felt different tonight, quieter, not restrained, but settled, like it had made a decision. He noticed the draft first. Cold air brushed the back of his neck as he passed the old coat closet near the stairs. That space had always been shallow, barely deep enough for winter jackets and a forgotten umbrella. Now the door sat slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness where there shouldn't have been one. He stopped. His heart slowed, then sped up again, that familiar rhythm of dread and curiosity entwined. He reached out and pulled the door open. The closet was gone. In its place was a narrow staircase descending into darkness, each step swallowed by shadow almost immediately. The air that rose from below was cool and dry, carrying the smell of dust, old paper, and something faintly organic, like a long-closed room that had never truly emptied. The house stayed still while he was awake. Daniel stood there for a long time, listening. No whispers came, no encouragement. The house did not invite him. It waited. He descended slowly, one hand trailing along the wall. The stairs were shallow, worn smooth by use, by many uses. The walls tightened around him, the ceiling lowering just enough to make him hunch. The staircase ended abruptly at a door. This one was different, thicker, heavier. The wood darkened with age, grained tight and unfamiliar. No handle, just a flat surface with a faint impression in the center, like something had once pressed there repeatedly. A palm. Daniel swallowed. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to retreat upstairs, to stay in the familiar horror of negotiated survival. But exhaustion dulled fear's edge, and something else, something heavier, pulled him forward. He pressed his hand to the door. It opened inward without resistance. The room beyond was large, larger than the house should allow. Soft light glowed from nowhere in particular, illuminating rows of shelves, alcoves carved into the walls, tables arranged with meticulous care. The space felt curated, reverent, like a museum. Daniel stepped inside. The door closed behind him. On the nearest shelf sat a pair of reading glasses, folded neatly atop a stack of books. The spines bore no titles, just dates. Next to them, a ceramic mug with a hairline crack down one side, stained faintly with tea. He moved closer, breath shallow. These weren't props, they were preserved. Each alcove held a small collection of objects, shoes worn down at the heel, a child's stuffed animal missing one eye, a set of keys with no car attached. Personal things, ordinary things, arranged not by category, but by intimacy, like memories made solid. Daniel walked deeper into the room, dread pooling in his stomach. He noticed the pattern then. Each grouping grew more complete, more detailed. The farther back he went, the more extensive the collections became. Clothes, furniture, entire corners of rooms recreated in miniature. Lives reduced and catalogued. The house remembers so you don't have to. The phrase echoed in his mind, no longer a whisper, but a truth settling into place. At the far end of the room stood something new, an alcove still empty, except for a single photograph resting on a small table. Daniel approached it slowly. It was the same photograph from upstairs,
the one he had tried to hide, tried to forget. Him and her, laughing, frozen in time. His hands trembled as he picked it up. The house had not stolen her. It had collected her, preserved the shape of her absence, waiting for the rest of the memory to arrive. Daniel understood now. The house didn't kill its occupants. It kept them, absorbed them piece by piece, sleep, guilt, voice, memory, until there was nothing left but artifacts, until the person no longer needed to remember who they were, because the house did it for them, forever. The room seemed to breathe around him, shelves subtly expanding, making space, anticipating. "You don't have to," Daniel whispered, though he wasn't sure who he was pleading with anymore. The house did not answer. It didn't need to, because the final room was not a trap. It was a promise. As Daniel stood there swaying with exhaustion, he realized the truth too late. The house wasn't waiting to take him. It was waiting for him to finish arriving. And somewhere above, the bedroom lay ready, prepared, remembering.
Chapter 10.
Chapter 10. The house never lets go. It replaces you. Daniel woke up in the bedroom. For a moment, just a thin, fragile moment, he believed that meant something had gone wrong, that he had escaped the final room, that he had imagined the shelves, the artifacts, the way the house had waited for him, like a curator waiting for the last piece of an exhibit. The ceiling above him was familiar, the faint water stain in the corner, the soft glow of the bedside lamp. Normal. He sat up slowly. His body felt lighter, not rested, not healed, just unburdened, as if something heavy had been set down without his permission. The house was silent. Not the tense, listening silence of before, but a deep, satisfied quiet, the kind that followed completion. Daniel swung his legs over the side of the bed. The floor was warm beneath his feet, welcoming. When he stood, the room adjusted subtly to his balance, catching him before he could sway. "You're done," he whispered. The house did not disagree. He moved through the hallway without resistance. The distance felt right again. Doors stayed where they belonged. The stairs led where they should. For the first time since arriving, the house did not test him. Downstairs, the living room was immaculate. Too immaculate. The couch sat perfectly centered. The lamp cast a pleasant, even glow. The air smelled faintly of polish and something else, paper, dust, memory. Daniel crossed to the front door. It opened easily. Outside, morning waited. Real morning. Sunlight spilled across the street, washing the house's shadow thin and harmless. Birds perched on power lines. A car passed at the far end of the block, its sound distant but grounding. Daniel stepped onto the porch. He did not feel relief. He felt absence. Something inside him had gone quiet. Not the house, him. The sharp edges of grief were gone. The constant ache had dulled to nothing. When he thought of her, the memory felt smooth, preserved, untouched by pain, curated. Daniel turned back toward the house. Through the open door, he saw the final change. On the wall of the living room, where no frame had hung before, there was now a photograph. Him, standing in the doorway, hand on the knob, expression calm, accepting. The house remembers, so you don't have to. Daniel understood then. The inheritance was not the house. The inheritance was the forgetting.
He stepped back inside. The door closed behind him with the same gentle finality it always had. Time lost its edges again. Daniel no longer slept because he needed to. He slept because the house asked him to. In return, it kept everything else orderly. His thoughts no longer spiraled. His guilt no longer clawed. His voice no longer whispered in the walls. The house did not need to practice him anymore. It already knew. Days, or something like them, passed. Daniel took on small rituals without realizing it, straightening furniture, adjusting lights, ensuring doors were slightly ajar, never fully closed, preparing. When the knock came, it did not startle him. Daniel opened the front door to find a woman standing on the porch, suitcase at her feet, eyes rimmed red with exhaustion. She smiled apologetically. "I hope this isn't strange. The listing said the owner might still be here." Daniel returned the smile easily. "It's not strange at all." He stepped aside, gesturing her in. The house warmed instantly, lights adjusting, air shifting to accommodate a new rhythm. The woman paused just inside the threshold. She said, "It's very quiet. That's what drew me to it." Daniel nodded. "It listens," he replied, the words coming naturally, comfortingly. "And it's very patient." As she crossed the living room, Daniel noticed the subtle signs, the way the house leaned in, attentive, the way the floorboards adjusted beneath her feet, the way the air learned her breathing. The cycle reset. Later, as she explored upstairs, Daniel moved through the house one last time, not as a victim, but as a custodian. In the final room below, a new alcove waited, empty but expectant. Soon, it would fill. Daniel returned to the living room and took his place by the window, watching the street grow quiet again. The house settled around him, content, still. The house was quiet again. It was learning someone new.
The house never hunted him. It never needed to. It waited. It listened. It learned. Because the most dangerous place to be is not inside a haunted house. It's inside your own unguarded mind. Grief invited it in. Silence fed it. Sleep sealed the deal. And somewhere, right now, another house is standing perfectly still because it's waiting for someone who thinks they need rest more than they need awareness. So tonight, when you turn off the lights, ask yourself one question. Are you falling asleep or are you being studied? If this story stayed with you, don't ignore it. Like, subscribe, stay awake, and remember, some houses don't want you gone. They want you remembered.